So there's something that's been playing on my mind recently, and I'm not really sure how I'm going to address it. And I've tried to write about this so many times, and I get a sentence or two in and I just can't sort of get past that initial block. So I figured I'll just do a video on it instead. What I've realized is that my whole childhood and up until very recently, I haven't really felt too connected to anything in the way that I see other people being connected. So, for example, I've never been into cars. So when I see people talking about cars and the engines and the styles and the history, it goes over my head. And the same thing's true for sports and technology and interests and a whole bunch of stuff. And only until really recently have I ever not felt that way. Like, so with my martial arts and writing and podcasting and the stuff that I'm doing now, I finally feel like I have a level of depth to hobbies or knowledge or interests or something like that that goes beyond mere survival. And I think that's really putting the nail on the head here, is that for a long time growing up, I had to focus on just surviving, and not in a way of like, fighting off people, but in my father's house, I wasn't really taught much. I wasn't really engaged with much. So I just sort of had to exist. And, there were times in which it was quite dangerous, but for the most part, it was just me sitting there doing nothing. And when I moved out of home, I had to worry about, paying the bills and getting my work done and all that sort of stuff. So I never really had either the time for pursuit of those interests nor the exposure to them. I've realized that now that I've got a son, I'm going to be showing him all of the different interests and stuff that I have, right? I'll be showing him, this is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, this is how you train. I'll be doing it with him. This is the history of this is the past of that, this is how you get into that. And he'll grow up with that level of knowledge. He'll grow up with me expressing that to him, and he'll just have that from birth, for lack of a better expression. I feel that given my father's just catatonic disposition and his just lack of interest in me, I've been sort of stunted in that regard. And for a long time, I felt like I've had to act and sort of pretend to just fit in with groups, because I just don't have that depth of understanding of a lot of stuff that people seem to have. Like, I understand how football works, right? Or sports or whatever, but I was never sort of indoctrinated into it. I never had that childhood exposure and experience. Same thing with cars, same thing with a lot of different topics. I just didn't have it. And now that I'm finally in a place where I'm finally able to feel comfortable enough to start exploring myself and start finding out who I am and what I am and why I am, I'm finding that there's this absolute level of just knowledge deficiency that I don't seem to have. I remember growing up, I had a couple of favorite bands. One of them was Linkin Park, right? And looking back at the lyrics and the style of songs, it's unsurprising, right? But even with artists and bands that I was into, I never really took the effort to look into their story or how they got there, or have an interest in them beyond literally just their music. And it's only until very recently, and obviously with the passing of Chester, I was quite upset by that. It sort of highlighted to me the fact that I've had this sort of struggle with connection, struggle with depth. It's like I can't, or I haven't, it's not that I can't, it's that I haven't had a practiced ability to develop in-depth connections. Not just with people, but with hobbies, with things, with groups. And it's very sad to realize. It's upsetting. I can't express it in any other way. I'm so grateful that I've found certain things in my life that I'm able to look into and go deep with. And I now have the courage to do so, because it's adding so much more depth to my life. I realized in the past I was living very shallowly, and because of that I was able to move on from jobs and move on from friendships and move on from interests without much care. I look back upon it now with regret because I could have been more present for those things. I could have been more invested. I realized that basically because I had a fear of abandonment from starting off with my father and other people in my life, I've struggled to feel safe committing, struggled to feel safe throwing my lot in and sort of getting deep into things. So now that I'm realizing that, I'm trying to take those steps to connect more. And the results are quite amazing, and so much more depth and joy and feeling. And that's something that I'm also struggle with, I suppose, is it's not that I don't feel, it's that feelings are very powerful and overwhelming. There's a distinctness that has long plagued my mental state. I'm like, am I just a non-feeling robot, or am I afraid, or am I, a lack of exposure to feelings? And I think it's the latter. Once again, growing up, I sort of taught myself to stop feeling, to stop connecting, because it was safer. That was good at the time. It kept me alive, it kept me going, it kept me safe from what was happening in my father's household and other things that happened to me. But it's a double-edged sword, because now I have to work that back. I had a psychologist appointment yesterday, and like every psychologist appointment, it rocks me and it sort of incapacitates me for the next few days of work. But what it did show me was, and what we sort of did come to, was the idea that I have to start connecting more and start embracing emotions more and start having deep emotional connections more, and sort of looking for those longer conversations and just talking to people and just going deep into things and having that risk of an emotional loss and that sort of stuff. So I guess I'm sharing this with you for a few reasons. The first one is number one, I think it'll help in the sense that by expressing this outwardly, it'll help other people with a similar past. Maybe they can relate to what I'm feeling, and if you can, comment below, let me know. Two, talking like this helps me to express myself, so hopefully I'll be able to create a blog post in which I can sort of narrow this sort of concept down. And I just want to connect with you all. So if you can relate to what I'm saying, please comment below, let me know what you think. And if you haven't already, head over to my website at zachary-phillips.com. From there, you'll be able to have links to my blog, to my podcast, to the Share Your Story project, and a bunch of other things. And also, if you can, I would appreciate some support. So the easiest thing, I suppose, would be just to tell someone about what I'm doing, share this video, share anything that I'm doing that you think would help someone. And if you have the capacity to and you would like to, you can also contribute to the cause on Patreon or through GoFundMe or by purchasing one of my books. Links to my website and below, and you'll be able to see all of that sort of stuff. Thanks for listening, guys. Honestly, all the comments and DMs that I'm receiving really, really speak a lot, and I'm just so grateful for it.